The history of oil. What is oil? What is oil? Sea bottom muds and sands of ancient geological eras, crushed by the weight of thousands of feet of overlying muds and sands. What is oil? What is oil?
Crumbled and broken and finally thrown above sea level by the movement of the Earth's crust.
What is oil? What is oil?
Petroleum, then, is the product of the partial decay of organic matter, a substance composed of two elements, hydrogen and carbon.
That is oil. That is oil. What were the earliest uses of oil? The source of all this mania? Well, the story begins in 3000 BC in central Mesopotamia. The inhabitants of Babylon were the first to find a purpose for the semi-solid oozy muck that bubbled to the surface. They refined it as a tonic, a commodity to trade, an ingredient in warfare, and a waterproofing aid. Noah's Ark was sealed with oil. It made Moses' basket float. The Trojans set the fuel aflame and cast it on Greek boats. The ancient walls of Jericho, though tragically ill-fated, were built with bricks and mortar which from oil were created. The Roman thinker Pliny had a novel oil aesthetic. He was the first to advocate its use as a cosmetic. The healthful balm from nature's secret spring, the bloom of health and life to man will bring, as from her depths the magic liquid flows to calm our sufferings and assuage our woes.
No singing of petroleum odes will clarify oil's mystery, quite like a list of the patriarchs that dominate its history.
George Bissell was the first to ask in 1854, can we use this viscous slime to produce something more? Inspired less by science than a will to strike it rich, he proposed making illuminants from nature's greasy pitch.
And he became wealthy. Now the next important figure in rock oil's leap to light was Bissell's friend Ben Silliman, who found one summer night that oil, when mined and gathered, when distilled and separated, was a precious raw resource that could be domesticated. Now Silliman was interested in petrol evolution, for he realized that oil would light the Industrial Revolution.
And he became
very wealthy.
1870 saw the emergence of another hydrocarbon giant. John D. Rockefeller was his name, and the entire Western world his client. His company was called Standard Oil. It ran firm and fine. It was the world's first multinational by 1879. Rockefeller was responsible for bringing the new light to the farthest corners of the globe. Oil was his delight.
And he became very, very wealthy.
The final focus of this personal petrol power profile is Henry Ford, the auto lord, who made America mobile. Light bulbs were replacing oil in the field of illumination, so Ford made cars that ran on gas and saved the corporation.
And he became filthy rich. By the early 20th century, oil had been discovered in Pennsylvania, Texas, Venezuela, Baku in the Soviet Union, in Indonesia, and in the Middle East.
Oh!
Oil changed the world.
Oil determined how nations fought and why they went to war. The era of mechanized battle had begun. World wars were fought between men and machines, and the machines were powered by oil. Oil, the blood of victory. Oil, the prize. By the end of World War II, 50% of the world's resources were under United States control.
In short, we became very, very wealthy.
Gasoline rationing in the United States was lifted in August 1945. Love of oil, the auto cult, now began to thrive.
What better way to celebrate the magic of a nation than dazzling up the life of its most popular creation?
The Red Star of Texaco and the Flying Horse of Mobile were icons of our oil religion whose mission now was global.
Immediately, the motorists were heard throughout the land, rising in a single voice, saying,
Fill her up!
The car says,
I need somewhere to go!
the car says,
I need somewhere to sleep!
the car says,
I need somewhere to stop!
the car says,
I need something to eat!
the car says,
I need something to do!
the car says,
I need somewhere to live!
crisis number 1, 1951.
Mohammad Mossadegh, the democratically elected president of Iran, nationalizes his country's oil industry and kicks all foreign oil concerns out.
Response.
Fearing the nationalist leanings of Mossadegh and the loss of cheap access to Iranian oil, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles orders a CIA-supported military coup against Mossadegh and returns the Shah to the throne.
Crisis number 2, 1973.
The oil-producing countries of the world organize a cartel that competes with American oil monopolies and initiates an embargo that changes the face of the post-war petroleum order in the Middle East.
Response.
Gasoline rationing and higher prices in the United States. Long lines and, as we may remember, short tempers. Mild attempts are made to become an environmentally conscious society, and President Jimmy Carter puts solar panels on the White House.
Crisis number 3, 1979.
The people of Iran oust the Shah from power, and the Ayatollah Khomeini becomes the country's leader.
Response.
In order to maintain our strategic interests in the Middle East, we destabilize the region by subsidizing and selling weapons to both sides during the Iran-Iraq War. President Reagan removes oil consumption regulations from the oil industry and takes the solar panels off the White House.
Crisis number 4, July 1990.
President Saddam Hussein of Iraq announces his plans to invade Kuwait based on long-standing land and oil complaints with that country.
Response.
George Bush's ambassador in Iraq. No, wait a minute! Listen, that's not how the script goes, okay? conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait. The issue is not associated with America.
July!
Now our next speaker is going to be Sammy from Refuse and Resist.
I want to say that the war against Iraq, the war against the Iraqi people, the so-called war that wasn't really a war, it was just a massacre and a slaughter by the United States Armed Forces against defenseless civilians and soldiers alike, killing hundreds of thousands of people. It was nothing but cowardly murder. And it's an extension of the same system that's a war against the people over here. The system that has brought crack into the country, that has spread massive addiction. The system that has created the AIDS virus and has done absolutely nothing to help the victims of it, who are the intended victims, targeted sections of the population. It's the same system that's created hundreds of thousands of homeless people in this city for the profits of the landlords, the banks, and the major corporations. Now, in terms of the foreign policy, when they're talking New World Order, they mean that Iraq was only the beginning, that they're going to wage war, if they can, against anyone that steps out of line. And we know who some of the next targets may be, the ones that have stood up to them. For example, Cuba. We have to be ready to defend the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban people against the attacks of this government and the corporations that are really behind it. That's why we're all here to support Joe and Sean, because they are an example of resistance to the war, and not merely resistance that says I'm against the war, but resistance that takes action to hinder and to interfere with the war effort. And it's not just necessary to be against the war, it's necessary to decide which side you're on when the war starts. Thank you very much.